Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. My name is Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're going to talk about virtual office hours. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was good. I'm kind of getting to that point in this semester where I'm sort of having nostalgia for the semester, even though it has been the actual worst semester. It's so difficult. But it's funny, and I think I could see it with the students too, because we were reminiscing a bit during our last class about... because we live in California, we had a week where there was no sunlight basically because of the smoke from the fires, and we were sort of, oh, do you remember that day when we thought the world was ending and we still did physics anyway? And so it's just a very bizarre time of year. I get this every year, but I didn't think it would happen this year. But here it is, the weird nostalgia. But how are you? How's your week gone?
My week was good. I wanted to tell you that I did the review session with Zoom polls that you had suggested, which was awesome. I love the polls, worked great. And one thing that I hadn't realized until I did it that was awesome about it was it gave me an indication of how long to give them to think about a problem. So I give them a problem, they start, giving their answers, and, when 90% are in or something, then that's a good time. Or I guess different people could have different thresholds, but I would know, a bunch of them are done, or they have hardly started yet, or whatever. So that was nice. And then I did some of those multiple choice questions where I knew which mistakes led to which wrong answers. So then if, a bunch of people said A, I was like, oh, you guys forgot that, the number of electrons was 6 or whatever.
Cool.
So it was really cool. I liked it. It was awesome.
Awesome. I'm going to do a little, a kind of review office hour, and I think I'm going to try and do the same voting type questions and stuff because, So cool. Okay, yeah. I like that.
Yeah. I had another review day where I didn't do multiple choice, and so I didn't do the polls, and it was also cool, but it was a little bit I have no idea, are you guys done yet?
I know. I mean, that's the thing with all this online business. There's even, normally the scratching of pencils is, an indicator of something, and just all those things, the cues that I didn't know I needed, but I did apparently, so, yeah. Yep.
Totally. So virtual office hours. This was your idea, and I was... Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Ahead. Can I do my quote?
Yes.
And it kind of feeds into something else that's been going on for me this week, or over the last couple of weeks. So I have become completely obsessed with Dolly Parton, and I feel like I'm late to this party, and I did not know how amazing and exciting and awesome she is. And so I listened to a podcast called Dolly Parton's America. I don't know if you've heard of it, but have you ever heard of Radiolab? It's the guy who does Radiolab. His dad is friends with Dolly Parton.
Oh, cool.
Through and he's the one who did the vaccine, and she donated $1 million.
Oh, gosh.
For the vaccine. So I'm all about Dolly Parton, and I just got super into it, and we've been listening to it a lot, and the kids are like, what's happening in the song Jolene? Why does she want to keep her man? And anyway, it's a whole thing that's been happening.
Oh, nice. I love that song.
But so I have a quote from Dolly Parton, which is, find out who you are and then do it on purpose. And that, to me, is basically my whole issue with teaching, I think, is, just embracing who I actually am and not feeling trying to be someone else, or that I'm whatever it is. So, yeah, that's
totally.
Meditating a bit on that.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm into it. And Dolly Parton, did you know that... Okay, sorry, just a side Dolly Parton fact about the song Jolene, but Nelson Mandela used to play Jolene.
Oh, really?
Yeah, what? The power of song. Anyway.
That's awesome.
So, yes.
And the White Stripes also cover Jolene, and I love their version as well.
Oh, I haven't heard that. Okay, I'm going to check it out.
It's cool. This is just a great song.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think I maybe didn't appreciate what, a talented songwriter she was.
Totally.
And yeah.
She's great.
She's amazing.
I'll have to listen to some of her.
All about Dolly. Okay, yes, so tell me, sorry, I interrupted you. What were you were saying?
I was jumping into saying how I was so excited when you suggested virtual office hours, because there's just different things that are awesome and different things that are tricky with them from regular office hours. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what what's working for you and what you're working on. So what is working for you with virtual office hours?
Well, so, and I have a weird thing with virtual office hours that I actually did them before. Like I did it last year for a particularly hard class. I would have one Zoom office hour a week the night before their homework was due because it was like pretty convoluted and involved, and it was super well attended and well appreciated, and it was all a big success and a win. And so that was kind of cool. And I definitely, with some of my restrictions around childcare and stuff, I think even if this ever does end and we go back to being in person, I think it's something I might carry on.
Cool.
And so that's something. The thing that worked for me was, I think I shared on here before that I had an assignment for attending office hours or tutoring. And there was a lot of grumbles, and there was a lot of people who came and were sort of like, okay, are we done? Can I go? And they're like, yeah.
Does this count? Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was fine. But there was a few people who came to that and then were like, oh, that wasn't terrible, and then came back. So
Oh, good.
that I think is something I'm definitely going to do earlier and maybe often next semester, like maybe have a couple of those. And so I think that was really good to get over the activation barrier of people coming to office hours and
Totally.
not being super awkward or
Totally.
like whatever, awkward but helpful. So yeah.
Yeah.
So what about
Well, that's
you?
good. Well, one thing that I'm really liking about virtual office hours is the waiting room, because it works.
This is getting
yeah.
right at my problem. So yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, sometimes in any kind of office hour, some kind of personal or individual question comes up, about grades or this late work or something that you don't want to talk about as a group, but it's office hours, so the door's open. So, in an actual room, sometimes I ask people to leave, close the door, but it's kind of awkward. Like, are they still there? Can they hear us? But in the Zoom, you just put them in the waiting room and they're gone. We can have a private conversation and they're not listening for sure. They can leave and come back if they want to. I still see that they're in the waiting room and I can let them in whenever it's their turn. So I really like that. So
tell me, okay,
that's been working
I
great.
actually haven't used the waiting room yet. So
Okay.
you just set it up, and then I didn't realize you can actually put people back out into it.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
So what I normally do, so you can enact the waiting room at any point, which just means that anybody who joins the meeting after that point goes in the waiting room instead of directly in. And you can click on anybody and tell them to be in the waiting room so they go away. So like, normally my office hours are you just click on the Zoom link and you're in my office hours. But if it comes up, if we're in some kind of scenario where I don't want people to just jump in, then I just enact the waiting room. And then anybody who does join is in the waiting room.
Okay, I have many questions. Because one thing, too, is do you just have a generic, like, I've seen a lot of people have, like, in their email signature, they just have their Zoom link. And that's just like, come and get me in the Zoom link. And I'm like, I don't want people to come and get me in the Zoom. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
do you have a specific, like, this is my office hours Zoom? Because I don't know if I'm making things too convoluted, because I have a class Zoom and then I have my office hours Zoom and I have these different links. And so do you have one for each type of thing, or do you have one?
I just have one. I'm only teaching one class that has, lectures and lab, and then I also have the office hours. So I have one link for all of that.
Got it.
Like, you click that link and you're doing whatever we're doing for the class at that point in time. Yeah.
Yeah, I probably could have just had, I think because I was making specific great breakout rooms for the two different classes, I guess maybe that's a reason not to, but I think I could have. Yeah, I haven't utilized the waiting room, and I think that's kind of getting at a little bit my working on.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
cool. And so you could just say, oh, hey, I need to talk to so-and-so about this in private.
Yeah. Well, like, the time it came up was I, by chance, had 3 people in office hours who all wanted to talk about individual things. And we were kind of like, okay, how are we going to do this? And I said, well, we could just have you guys come back in 10 minutes. But that was kind of awkward because, like, is 10 minutes the right amount of time? So we ended up saying, okay, I'm just going to put 2 of you in the waiting room. You can leave and come back if you want to. But whenever I'm done talking with, person A, I'll just let person B in. And if they're not, if they need to leave and come back, that's fine. So it worked out surprisingly well, although I hadn't anticipated the problem until it happened.
Yeah, okay. That's good to know. I don't know why I've just been kind of, with the waiting room, like it's going to be this other thing to deal with, but I think I need to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm not sure is how to make it clear to people in the waiting room. Like, if I put them in the waiting room, then they know that I know they're in the waiting room. But if they join and they're in the waiting room, I'm not sure how to make it clear to them, I know you're there and I will let you in soon, rather than, oh, I just forgot about office hours
like
today,
a broadcast thing, or like you could send a message?
Oh, I wonder if that goes into the waiting room. Good question.
Well, I did it once with breakout rooms, but then half the people didn't see it. Like, I don't know if they just weren't sort of seeing what was happening. So that's something I might explore. Yeah, could you do a message of, I'm just talking to someone right now.
Yeah, I'll let you in shortly. There must be a way to either chat or broadcast a message. We'll have to look into that. But okay, the waiting room has been working well, and better, in fact, than face-to-face office hours for those private conversations.
Yeah.
Oh, and I also have one other thing that I think works better with the Zoom office hours, which is if a student's working on an assignment and they want to show me something where they're stuck. And if it's an electronic one, then they can just share their screen. Or if it's handwriting, they can take a picture and email it to me. And either way, we're both looking at it easily. As opposed to if they were in my office, we'd have to both be looking at this piece of paper, or they'd have to open their computer and find the file, and we'd have to both look at that. So it really is actually easier for us to both look at a file together, and I can be like, oh, right there is where the calculations went awry, and they're like, oh, okay, so this, And
so would you say to them kind of mid-sentence, like, oh, hang on, take a picture of this and email it to me?
Yes, yeah. So if they're like, if they have their, calculations written out on a paper, I'd be like, oh, can you send that to me? Because, they can hold the phone pointing at...
Oh, my God, no.
But that's really hard. That doesn't...
I've had so many people just like... Yeah, just trying to peer into the screen and being like, no, I can't.
Yeah, totally. But if they take a picture of their work and email it to me, and then that's great, because then I can look at it on my screen, sharing it with them, and I can use my mouse to point like, okay, I'm with you up to here, but then at this then line, you kind of, So I think it works pretty well. As opposed to if we were in the office, they'd have to hand me the paper. I'd find the point, I'd put it back to them, and I'd point at the piece of, the part. So it totally works face-to-face, but I'm actually... pleasantly surprised that I think it works better over Zoom.
That's awesome. I like it. Yeah, definitely. I have had with a couple of the simulation labs where they can share it and you're like, oh, yeah, you just haven't whatever. And so, yeah, that's super helpful.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool.
So what about you?
Working on. Yeah. So I think one thing that I really have been struggling with a lot is just so many email questions. And I think there's many factors in that. And I think one of them is that they are, they don't have each other. Just sort of, there's so many things that would just get dealt with if they...
Somebody would tell somebody else and the information would spread around
That's
broadly.
Like a broader sort of thing. I've been thinking about this whole virtual teaching. It would be so interesting to actually teach an online course in a normal period of time. And see, is it as difficult? Because I have a friend who teaches a lot of online courses, and she says this semester is extremely challenging for her, even though like she's done this all before. But I think it's because just things like the students are all scattered off into different places. There isn't like resources on campus, like, oh, you can just go to the computer lab or go to the library.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of extra factors, or just even like I was mentioning the doom sky for that week, or like all the things that have been happening. And so I think I'd be super curious to actually teach it online in a normal time period and see what it was like. But anyway, what was my whole rambling about? Oh yeah, so the the email questions and just the fact that they don't have enough of, so I'm wondering, I think I'm going to have more office hours next semester.
Okay.
And this year I was so like stumbling my way around trying to figure out the kids' schoolwork and then Eric's work. And so I only had 2 live office hours, and then the other ones were email office hours. But I sort of shot myself in the foot by answering email questions at any time. And so I think I kind of created that situation where I was just getting these constant email questions. And so I'm going to have more Zoom office hours. I think that will be good, hopefully, for addressing some of those things. But the biggest thing I'm struggling with the Zoom office hours is lurkers. And again, me creating a terrible situation where I was doing office hour stuff And basically it has become me just working through the problem on my iPad and them watching, which is fine because there's a couple of people who are like, I'm like, which force is it? And they're like, it's the normal force. And you're like, that's what it is. And so in that case, it's much like what I do in person.
Okay.
But I have lurkers who are not contributing anything. And early on, when people were contributing, I said, I can send you a PDF of what I'm writing right now. So they were kind of like trying to scribble things down. And I was like, kind of would rather they were following along. And so I was like, I'll send you the thing afterwards. So I've kind of created this situation where I have a whole bunch of lurkers who come, don't contribute anything, listen in, and then sort of are like, hey, so can I have that PDF too? And it's sort of hard to quantify, well, you didn't contribute enough for me to send you basically what's the homework solution. So I think, I just don't totally know how to. I had a really good system for in-person office hours where I would really just have mostly people one at a time-ish.
Okay.
And sometimes people would be listening in, but it was very easy to be like, and what do you think, Claire? Because you're standing right there and you're not saying anything. And so kind of pull people in. But even
interesting
with the Zoom office hours, especially with people's cameras off, and it's just so hard to kind of pull people in. And like another thing I did a lot in office hours was, oh, hey, you go work on the beginning of this problem and come back when you get the answer to A, and then we'll go on to B. And it's so difficult to do that. So I think, and given the crazy semester that's in it, it's not the end of the world if it's just another hour of me solving problems and people watching it. But it's not what I want it to be in terms of people participating. So, yeah, it's just turned into this complete mess. And there's a lot of expectation from students now of like, so can I get the notes? And you're like, no, but yes, but I don't know.
Sure. So you don't actually want to give out the notes to people. You want them to get the experience of having the back and forth of going through the problems. That's what your goal is for the office hours.
Right. And so I'm wondering now from hearing you, should I recreate some of that, what I used to do in person, which we're using the waiting room and like, oh, great. So I'm going to talk to you. And what's your question? Here's a tip. Go and try it. Come back. And then we'll talk about it then. And so maybe that's what I need to do.
I have done that even without the waiting room. I'm kind of new to using the waiting room. So far I've only used it for personal kind of questions. But I have done, where 3 people are in office hours and one of them has questions on the homework and one of them has questions on this practice exam or whatever. And so sometimes a lot of times it actually works out where so-and-so has a question on the practice exam and everyone else is like, I would love to hear that too. So it's totally cool if we just do that first.
Totally.
So that's always awesome. And then, usually the way that I do it is I think about, okay, so-and-so asked the question. So that's the person I'm going to be focusing on, but I'm also going to check in with everyone else and say, do you have questions? What do you think? Like, how are you feeling about this problem? And then once we finish that question, then we'll go to somebody else. Okay, this other person had a question about this homework problem. Let's go do that. And that has worked pretty well. Sometimes you have a scenario where somebody doesn't have any interest in hearing about this problem and only wants their own answer, but in that case, they can wait or come back or something like that. And most of the time, it seems like, they're there in office hours because they want more practice or they want more help. So it seems like a lot of the time, people have been willing to, or in fact, expressed enthusiasm to hear the discussion on this other problem too.
Oh yeah, and I mean this is the thing. I'm like, when I'm saying this, it's like 80% of the people there are like actively participating, but it's just how to kind of, and maybe this is a bigger question even in class when you have someone who's not contributing but is just sort of absorbing and. And obviously it's always going to be an ebb and flow. Some people are better at some things, but when that's kind of like always what they're doing, like how do you call that out? And
well, it seems to me like it's also a question on what your goals are. Like, is it a requirement for them to participate? Is that what you want? Or is it that you is it a requirement that they participate? Because if so, you could tell them that.
Yes, that's true. Make that clear.
Yeah. And if you don't mind giving out the answers to the homework to those who come to office hours, that is setting up some interesting incentives. but you, of course, do give out the answers to those who come to office hours. Yeah.
I think my
I think
biggest
it's
mistake was emailing
goal.
the notes. I think that was like the biggest mistake, because then it became. I even had one guy last week didn't come to office hours. He's like, "Could you just email me the notes that you?" And I was like, no,
Sure,
definitely not.
sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot of the stuff with this semester that I haven't been happy about. I sort of did kind of in response to just how stressful things have been for everybody.
Sure.
And yeah, it's just not been exactly how I would want it to go. And I kind of, do you ever have these where you kind of get to a point and you're like, it's a bit too late to try and, like, I'm not in the last week going to suddenly have a boundary and be like, no, it's,
Right.
So it's tricky. But.
And it's always true, right? That we try something and then we see the impacts and then we say, oh, actually, it made a lot of sense to send out the PDFs of this problem worked out when I decided to do it, but now I see some more impacts and so I'm not going to do that anymore, or
totally
whatever it might be. Yeah.
So tell me, what are you working on for virtual office hours?
Well, so this was especially a problem early in the semester, but that I would forget to go to my virtual office hours.
Dude, totally. Well, you don't have all the cues we normally have. We normally have so many cues. And
I actually would forget my regular office hours in my office fairly often. But if I'm in my office, it's
no
okay.
one knew you forgot, because they're like, hey, and you're like, yes, I am exactly here waiting for you.
Thanks for coming to office hours. Right. So, So, yeah. So now, it's on my calendar and it just became more of the routine, but just to remember to actually sign into office hours.
I did have that once in person, though, where I went to the loo and I came back and someone was sitting outside my door, and whatever reason I was really grumpy, but I was kind of like, hi, like, what? They were like, for your office hours, like, good, yes, my office hours, which I totally remembered, and I just was like, oh, but it's hard. It's really hard with, like, being at home. And it was even hard for me in the beginning to remember when we had class. Like, that was...
Totally. It's all the cues are not there. So, forgetting to go was a common... This one student was always the one who was there when I forgot to go. And he would always send me a nice email like, just wondering if there were office hours today. And I'd be like, oh, right, be right there.
Do you know what's hilarious? Because I actually had that student before, and he was always the one who was like, hey, so... I'm just wondering, was there meant to be a homework? And, like, he's always so polite in how he's telling you that you've completely messed something up. But, like, so I love him. And it's good. I was thinking, I have one helper student this semester too, who's always like, so there's no way of submitting the reading, but it could be just a problem on my end. And you're like, it's not, it's definitely me. But it's sort of good that it's been condensed into her, because no one else in the class knows what a bumbling idiot I am. They think, like, I always open the assignments exactly right, but so maybe it's good. He's the only one who knows you've been late.
He's the only one that knows I ever forget office hours, but I did forget them quite a few times on him. But that's just a matter of practicing actually going to the office hours. And the other thing is that I was wondering if maybe it was scarier for students to come to Zoom office hours. I don't really know if that's true. I just kind of suspect that, maybe it's easier to walk down the hallway and kind of look in and see if it looks intimidating, rather than like, you are now face to face with this person as soon as you click this link. And I had quite a few people come to office hours, so I have no real data or anything, but it just seems a little scarier. But I like that you had an assignment where they came to office hours, so at least hopefully maybe that alleviated some of that scariness.
And sometimes I would do a thing where I would call on people who had gone to office hours in Zoom and be like, can you tell everyone, was it terrible? And they were like, no, it wasn't. It was actually fine. And we were in a different room and we got to see this. And so, it was helpful, I guess. But sometimes it is weird. I thought that kids would kind of utilize office hours in tutoring a lot more, because they're just at home and they just click a link. But it's been way less. So I wonder, is it that kind of activation of, it could just be you and her, like, in the office hour.
Right. If you're walking down a hallway, you can kind of see, oh, there's someone else there. Maybe that makes it easier. Yeah. One thing I've been doing this semester is having my office hours right after lecture, which, I have them other times too, in case someone has a class right after lecture. But it's the same link and it's right after lecture. So, my goal was that quick trickle of quick questions right after class would just
Yeah.
expand into office hours a little more easily, which, you know, a bunch of people did stay. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's an interesting business, all of this
Totally.
virtual stuff for
Yeah.
sure. And now that we're
Yeah.
experts, next semester will be just a piece of cake. So that'll
Totally.
be great. Yeah.
Zoom masters next semester.
Dude, I wish Zoom had a feature where you could unmute yourself with thought. That would be
Ooh.
so amazing. But yeah, I'm always fumbling around with the mute button. Yeah.
Do you know the space bar?
No. What's
You hold the space bar and it temporarily unmutes yourself while you're holding the space bar.
okay? That's
It's not
exciting.
quite just your thought, but it's
It's
pretty.
it's closer than scrambling around with the mouse. So, ooh, interesting. Okay, Claire, as always, you're blowing my mind with helpful stuff.
Well, thanks a lot,
Cool.
Ruth.
Thanks for chatting. Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.